Is with us today, and I'd like to take the time to introduce them to you. We have Corporal Andrew Smith, United States Army, 132 Infantry, 10th Mountain Division. Andrew was injured in the Battle of Fallujah in 2003. In the back here, raise your hand up, Jace. This is Specialist Jace Padilla. Sergeant, woo! Sergeant Jace Padilla. Army, 1st Infantry Division, 18th Regiment, Bravo Company. Jace was injured on Veterans Day in November 2006 when a bomb exploded directly under his feet. In the front here, we have Sergeant Jason Nielsen, Army National Guard, Military Police. Jason was injured in October 2005. He was shot by a sniper in Baghdad, Iraq. He served in the Army National Guard for 9 years and was told he would never walk. And look at him now. In the front here, we have a very special guest. This is Mr. Joe Kane. Joe's son, Staff Sergeant Joe Kane, was a devoted career soldier in the United States Army. His son was killed by an IED in October of 2006 in Iraq. His son was notorious for being upbeat, always making people laugh, and he was the type of guy who would do anything for anybody. And I'd like to introduce to you Joe Kane. He will be our first speaker.
Thank you, Heather. I need the strength of my wife here, so she's going to be with me, holding me up. I too wrote notes down because my emotions are so intense that, excuse me. Our son, Staff Sergeant Joseph M. Kane, was killed in Iraq October 14, 2006, at the age of 35. This was his second tour of Iraq, and he had served 13 years in the Army. He was married to Michelle French, and they had 3 wonderful children. Michaela, 8, Daniel, 7, Brendan James, 3. Joe was adopted. We and our daughter Joanne received him into our arms and our hearts when he was only 6 days old. Like all children, he gave us joys and sorrows. The joy of his humor that would not allow a sad person leave the room without a smile on their face. And sorrow when he played hooky on his first day of kindergarten. We knew we were in trouble with school in the future. He was a funny guy. Mary and I remember hearing him tell knock-knock jokes in the family room after Mary's dad's funeral. Joe was only 12 at the time. Shortly after his death, Joe's commanding officer in Iraq wrote us a letter detailing his memorial service. He said Joe brought light to the dark nights of Iraq. He'd play his guitar, sing and tell jokes to bring those smiles. One thing about Joe stands out in my memory of him. As a young man, he always looked out for the underdog in his group of friends. If there was one friend that others seemed to avoid, Joe would make sure he would pull them into the conversation or the games they were playing. He never lost that trait. After his death, his friends told us stories about him we had never known. Our friend Father Larry Kozak took us aside and shared with us how Joe had befriended him. Larry was shy and introverted, but Joe brought him out of his shell during grade school and into high school. We joke around today and say that Joe helped make a Catholic priest. The second story was told to us by a young mother of 2 who had a child who, as a child, had gone through her parents' divorce. She told us that Joe reached out to her and comforted her in her hurt and confusion. Joe is buried near Seattle, Washington, in a town called Port Orchard on Puget Sound. During the church service, I noticed a tall, lanky young man who looked a little out of place. I spoke with him and asked how he knew our son, Joe. He said that Joe had been his corporal when he was in the Army. He had grown up on a farm, and when he was in the Army, Joe kept him focused on being a good person as well as a good soldier. I asked him what his plans were, and now that he was out of the Army. He said he would be starting college the following year. Mary and I will remember Joe through his children, Michaela, Daniel, and Brendan James. We visited them in July. I think we played for 7 out of 10 days with them. To end, I want to thank all of you here today for honoring our fallen heroes and their families. Don't forget their families, and the wounded heroes. Mary and I wondered where we would be today in our recovery without what we call faith, family, and friends. Thank you.